Awesome. Okay, so we're live. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We at Novel Suspects are incredibly excited for tonight's event. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping things. This is being recorded, so if you need to hop off early, it will still be here, or for those who want to come back for cocktail making purposes, it will be here. And we'll be taking questions at the end. On the right-hand side, you'll see a QA section, so just please drop your questions there, and we'll get to those at the end of the event. So those are basically all the housekeeping, pretty short. I'm happy to introduce tonight's speakers, the two hosts of the criminally popular, Jesus, am I already drinking? The criminally popular podcast, Criminalia, Holly Frey and Maria Trimarchi. So Holly has been hosting podcasts for over a decade. She's the creator and co-host of Criminalia and co-host of Stuff You Missed in History Class. And Maria is best known as a storyteller, a researcher, a digital pioneer. I love that. She investigates true crime history as a writer and the co-host of Criminalia. Their book, Killer Cocktails, Dangerous Drinks, Inspired by History's Most Nefarious Crimes, is on sale October 15th from Hachette Books. So thank you, ladies, for joining us. I clearly need to get a drink in me, and so I'm going to hide my face. Cocktail shaker. I'm so excited. So yeah, with that being said, I'll drop the link to your book in the chat and let's get started.
All right.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Hi, everybody. So Maria and I thought maybe the best way to do this tonight would be, we're going to do 2 cocktails and 2 mocktails. And we thought we would also share with you the entries from the book that correlate to those. So we're going to kick things off with a little reading. It's brief. These are not long entries. If you listen to the show, they're abridged from the way we originally told these stories. So you might see them in a new light. So we are going to kick off with Captain Henry Every. And Maria is going to start us out. And I have to put on my glasses because I'm a woman of a certain age.
Yay to women of a certain age. All right, let's get started. Captain Henry Every, the pirate who got away with it. Henry Every was in his late 30s when he became one of the most successful pirates in history, a feat he accomplished over the span of just 2 years. That's quite something when you're pirating during the golden age of piracy, competing for the honor against thousands of now infamous pirates like Captain Kidd, Calico Jack, Black Bart, and Blackbeard. And yet, according to his legend, Henry's reputation-making heist was one of the most profitable acts of piracy ever, putting all those other names to shame.
His story on the seas begins in the 1670s, when he joined the Royal Navy as a midshipman on a 64-gun ship named the HMS Rupert. But Henry didn't stay on the straight and narrow for long. After spending time in the Navy, he worked as a privateer. Basically, he was paid by the government to practice acts of piracy against ships from enemy countries. He built an impressive career for himself, and then, when he took command of the royal warship, the 46-gun Charles II, he announced his intention to turn pirate full-time, declaring, "I am captain of this ship now. I am bound to Madagascar with the design of making my own fortune, and that of all the brave fellows joined with me."
As Captain Henry Every, he renamed the Charles II as the Fancy, and she, with her new captain and crew, sailed for the African coasts where trade routes were full of English, Spanish, and French ships just waiting to be preyed upon by pirates. Henry operated in both the Atlantic Ocean and in the Indian Ocean, following what was known as the Pirate Round, which was a sailing route popular among English pirates. It was largely the same route that was used by the East India Company ships, a company incorporated by royal charter and formed essentially for the exploitation of trade with East and Southeast Asia and India.
After months of plundering trade routes, Henry and his crew amassed a fleet of 5 ships, giving him enough power to attack even the most well-armored vessels. So when he learned there was real treasure to be taken, he was ready to go. The target was a Mughal Empire armada sailing from the Red Sea on a voyage home to Surat, India. The convoy would primarily be carrying Muslim pilgrims on their way to the holy city of Mecca, but that's not what interested him. The fleet would also include several treasure filled merchant vessels owned by the Emperor Aurangzeb Alamgir, and that's what Henry wanted. Their flagship, Ganji Sawai, was equipped with several dozen cannons and upward of 400 riflemen, which was more firepower than Henry's entire pirate fleet possessed. But, ambitious and undeterred, Henry attacked anyway. Henry's crew was brutal and murderous, and in the end, they were victorious, which quickly turned Captain Every into the world's most prosperous and most wanted pirate.
Following the devastating loss, the East India Company feared for the safety of their own trade agreements and placed a bounty on Henry's head. They called him and his crew notorious rogues and offered a reward to anyone who took part in their capture. But despite the promise of fortune, Henry was never brought to account for his crimes. Much of his crew retired after that haul, but Henry just vanished. And in doing so, he became one of the very few pirate captains, and some will tell you the only, to escape with his loot before being killed in battle or arrested and hanged.
During the time of Captain Henry Every, not many pirates died rich, or even in their own beds. Tales we hear about the end of Henry's life run the gamut, so let's indulge them for a moment. It was said that Henry married an Indian princess. He didn't. There was also talk of Henry founding a new monarchy, though no one knew where. He didn't. Some believe he changed his name to Benjamin Bridgman after using it for an alias for many years and quietly lived out the rest of his life in an undisclosed location. He didn't? This one is intriguing, but it's hard to prove definitively one way or the other. And there were also accounts that suggested that Henry had squandered his fortune and died on the streets of London. As far as we know, he didn't. In the end, all we have left are tall tales, and every story is more than worth its weight in gold. So the cocktail for this one is called The Vanishing Pirate. And this is one I wanted to make a cocktail that was super delicious and easy to drink, so it would vanish quickly. Just like Henry. And if you drink enough, which is easy to do, but please don't, your stories will get very hazy and your tales very tall. So it is also something meant to be a delicious sip, like the kind of thing that you would have as you whiled away your time under the radar. So that everybody gets a clear look at ingredients. I'm going to hold up the ingredient card for a second, and you can, if you wish,
if you can see, I can see
it. Great. I'm going to do this for another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we will make this drink. So this is a really easy one. It's one that you make in the glass, which I love because that keeps it super simple. The way my setup is, you won't see my glass the whole time, but trust, it's here. Ta-da. And we're not going to start with ice in the glass, and I'll tell you why we don't in a minute. So this one is as easy as possible. We are going to start out with an ounce of elderflower liqueur. Whatever your brand is, that's great. Saint Germain is the popular one, but there are lots. You can measure with your heart if that's how you do. But if you want consistent drinks, you really need a jigger. That's what's up. So we have one of those, 1 ounce of that.
I just accidentally started the mocktail, so I'm going to catch up for a minute.
Maria's on her own journey.
I'm on my own adventure. Just keep going.
And so the next thing you want is an ounce of strawberry vodka. Now, there are a lot of different brands of strawberry vodka that you can get at your local liquor store. This one, mine is actually not one most people can get. It's a friend of mine brought it to me from overseas. But if for some reason you cannot get strawberry vodka, this is very easy to do. You can do an infusion, literally just Pour your regular clean vodka into a receptacle like a mason jar with a bunch of strawberries and leave it for a couple days in the fridge. Give it a good shake now and again, and then just strain the strawberries off. This is one of those ones where you're going to be tempted to eat those strawberries. They don't taste good, so don't do that. But
I live in a very small rural area, and it was easy for me to find Smirnoff strawberry vodka.
Great.
It was the only one they had, but they had it.
And then the last ingredient that we're going to add here is 6 ounces of ginger beer.
Yes.
And so I am just pouring mine right in. Apologies that you got to hear my snap of my my can there. And then I just stir this one a little bit. Still no ice. Don't sweat it. I promise we'll make it cold. And the reason that we're doing that is sometimes when you have a liqueur and you're building something in the glass, or this also goes for any drinks that have syrups, if you put the ice in first, the liqueur and the syrup can get a little bit too thick in their viscosity, and it makes it a little bit harder to mix the drink. So now that we have it stirred a bit, we're going to add our ice. I have to run over here to my ice bucket. I'm coming back, I promise. Scoopies. And then I also like to stir it again once the ice is added, and that's just to chill all of the components and make sure your liquid is nice and chilly. Dun, dun, dun. This is such an easy drink to make that it's like almost criminal. And I will wait for Maria to be ready, and then we'll have a little cheers and a sip.
I was having a moment with my foam. I'm sorry. Just enjoying it, and I'll have a little sip.
Dun, dun, dun. The
cheers.
Cheers.
Oh, it's one of my favorite drinks in this book.
I know, it's so super easy and yummy, and I love it. I like, a little berry anything with a ginger beer. It's just super easy. It kind of works all year round, depending on how you flavor it. Super yum. So
I love all 3 ingredients separately, so we've just put them together, and I am super happy.
It's true. Can confirm. Maria loves ginger beer. So for the mocktail we're going to do a little bit more elbow grease. I promise it's not scary. And you're going to have a very different looking drink. And then I'll talk about a garnish option at the end. So for this, you're going to put 4 strawberries that have been cut in half, which I have already pre-cut all of mine.
Me too.
And I'm just dumping them in here.
I figured you guys wouldn't want to wait for me to cut things.
Right? I did debate. I was like, should I fresh squeeze lemons? And then I was like, no.
No, I did that before too.
Yeah. So you have a lovely little cup of strawberries here. And then you are going to put in an ounce of elderflower syrup. This is another one that, like, I order mine online, obviously, in large batch because I use it a lot. If you are a person that doesn't drink and you like making mocktails, this is like secret weapon. You can put it in anything almost, and it really kind of elevates it. It gives it a nice round body. So we'll do an ounce of that.
Yes. What you don't hear on the show is me talking about how much I love this drink, the elderflower. Anytime it comes up, I'm so excited.
We mention it in the book, but elderflower liqueur, and I would extend it to syrup, is often called bartender's ketchup because it is one of those things that you can add to a drink that isn't quite landing right, and you can kind of zhuzh it up and give it a little something, something. So now that you have
feel a little on it. It's like ketchup.
Yeah. Not actual ketchup. Okay. Now that you have your, I will turn this so the hands aren't obstructing it. But now that you have your strawberries and your syrup in the glass, we're just going to give it a quick muddle. Here's my muddler. I have a muddler. I think Maria does too. But if you just have a spoon, you're good. Whatever, we'll mush it. And this is one where I'm going to call this muddler's choice because I like, usually if we're doing something like an herb in a muddling situation, I'm always like, don't destroy it to pieces. You just want to get the oils out. But when you're doing something like this, which is a fruit that you are going to leave in this drink, if you like it really mushy, great. If you like it to have still some body and some structure to the fruit, also great. Mine is pretty squishy-ushy. That's a very technical term.
It is. I've heard it before. This part of making this drink, by the way, smells delicious.
It does smell very
good. Strawberries muddled. Oh my gosh, yeah.
It does smell very, very good. And then
Okay.
just as before, we're going to put our ginger beer on top of that and give it a little stir. This one gets real fizzy because of the fruit that's in it. So take your time. Zoop-a-doop-a-doops. Let me get my... I'm cross-contaminating with the alcoholic one by using the same spoon, but if you are doing a no alcohol situation, obviously you would not do that. And I'm giving mine a stir just as before, and then I'll grab some ice, just like before. You may have an ice overload situation here.
A foam overload situation going on.
Listen, it kind of is
I guess
nice
I'm just
though
gonna
because
have
it,
to.
it makes its
Yeah,
own little topper. It's really cute.
it's true. I just got to drink a little bit of that off, and then add my ice.
Which is very nice. So,
Oh, that's lovely.
this is one of those things that if you want to do a garnish on it, obviously super easy, and a strawberry is the obvious choice. I have one here that I have just cut the stem side off, and I'm literally just cutting a pretty slice out of the middle, like so. And then I like to cut this so that there are there are like three legs to it. I don't know if you can see there. One, two, three. Like it's two slits here and here. And then you can pop it on your glass in a way, maybe. I can try to show you.
Hopefully.
Yeah. So then you kind of can pop it on your glass like that, and it just gives it a little bit
It's
more
pretty.
fruit into the glass, which I always like because then you can just kick it over as you're drinking, or you can just eat it right off of there.
Exactly. So in the
Okay,
book, Holly recommends you recommended the strawberry as the
I do.
topper, don't you? So
I
there's a
do.
few recipes where Holly recommends an herb to go with it, and I actually pulled out a little bit of rosemary to go with this
That's
drink.
for our next one,
Um,
though.
I know, and I actually was looking at this one first and pulled out my rosemary, and then went to my next recipe and went, "Oh, I guess I'll use it for both."
Yes,
But
yes, I'll have it.
I really like the herb strawberry combination: strawberry
I do
dill,
too.
strawberry rosemary, strawberry
Hmm?
basil, all of that kind of thing. So um, I like it with that. I also still have quite a bit of foam to drink.
I will say this too. This is one of those things, and I was going to mention it in our next one because we do have rosemary as a garnish,
Yes.
but it's not part of the drink. And there are different schools of thought on this. There are definitely people that feel pretty strongly that you shouldn't garnish with something that isn't included in the drink. In our next story, because it is one of our witchcraft stories, an herb of some
Yes.
sort makes a lot of sense to me. And I like rosemary because even if it's not included in the ingredients of the drink, it adds this
Mhm.
really beautiful aroma as you're holding it up to your lips. And that to me is really all I need.
To pretend
I
that you
love
were an
that like moment of
apothecary.
aroma. Yeah. So with that,
So we have our two first beverages I have
yes,
lined
we
up.
have
I'm making a little bit of a mess. Excuse
alcoholic,
me.
non-alcoholic, so many drinks available. I'm just gonna have a sip of each. Don't mind me. Mm.
A couple sips this. The one with I love the one with the strawberry vodka, but the one with the actual fruit, the mocktail, because it has fruit, I just always love the ones
It's
that end
super
up having
yummy.
pieces.
It's
Yeah.
super yummy. I see that Kate L in the chat thought we were gonna do hag juice, which we are not doing, but it is
Oh,
another
but
good one.
it's a great suggestion. Yes.
And now we are gonna do our
Another
second
story,
reading.
which moves
Um,
us to witchcraft and alchemy,
yes, and
away
we're
from
gonna talk for a
pirates.
moment about Matuccia di Francesco. I have to once again put on my spectacles.
Spectacle twins.
Yeah. So this
Right.
is, are you ready, my dear?
I am ready for you.
This is herbalist Matuccia di Francesco could fly. Picture it. One day, your neighborhood pharmacy is shuttered because your pharmacist, or maybe your doctor, has been arrested, accused of drinking the blood of infants and flying to an orgy involving the devil. Well, back in the 14th century, this is exactly what happened in the small village of Ripabianca, which sits in the Umbria region of Italy. Most people there lived in rural servitude. Most people were uneducated. Many were superstitious. And many relied on Matuccia de Francesco for their health and well being. At least, that is, before she was accused of fornicating with the devil.
Things go downhill from there when that happens. Matteuccia was an expert on herbs and was probably an apothecary or at least worked in a similar capacity. She prepared ointments and herbal teas to heal ailments and injuries, maybe with the recitation of a few magic words for a sprinkle of good measure. It would have been likely for her to have been the local midwife and considered a wise woman in her village, though that is still just speculation. As word about Matteuccia's herbal remedies and potions spread, her client base grew quite sizable. Her advice and tinctures were mostly harmless, even if they seemed a little strange. Think things like a salve made out of radish, garlic, wormwood, and a few other herbs thrown in, boiled in butter, strained, and then used to cure your headaches. It might seem odd, but if it works, it works.
Most people in the medieval era never saw a doctor, but they absolutely went to visit their local wise woman. Unlike physicians, who at the time were kind of a haphazard group who studied philosophy and the stars and trained, and we use that term very loosely, mainly to observe, wise women were able to apply more than 600 plants for medicinal uses, largely thanks to Dioscorides, a Greek physician, pharmacologist, and botanist who shared his knowledge via multiple volumes about herbal medicine. Though the community benefited from her work, Matteuccia was accused of being, quote, a woman of a bad life and reputation, public enchantress, sorceress, evil spellcaster, and witch. The records of her trial detailed the charms she used, and her specialties seem to have consisted mainly of healing prayers and love spells.
We don't meet up with Matteuccia in history because of her apothecary skills, though. We meet her after she's accused by so-called reputable men of practicing witchcraft. Witch hunts were gaining popularity at this time because authorities were redefining the crimes of witchcraft. People could now say things like, she has a wart and witches have warts, so we should kill her. Basically, it gave everyone a kind of checklist to determine whether someone was a witch or not. Frequently encouraged by priests, judges, and local authorities who may or may not have studied theology or law, these so-called experts believed that there were absolutely witches in their society and that their evil needed to be expelled.
Interestingly, Matteuccia's trial is one of the earliest Italian witchcraft cases for which the complete trial record survives. And what really makes it stand out is that it's also considered the first case where an alleged witch is accused of flying. She was charged with more than 30 counts of witchcraft in all, and among them were accusations she had drunk the blood of many infants, of being able to turn into a cat, and of having flown on a goat. According to court records, her accusers characterized her herbalist services as enchantment, claiming that she, quote, enchanted the body, head, or other limbs of patients. It really didn't matter if her customers died or if she cured their illness, though. She would still have been held guilty of practicing witchcraft because reputable men said so.
We know Matteuccia confessed to the accusations against her, though it's unclear if that confession happened under torture, which was super common at the time and especially common at witch trials. She confessed to having sold medicine, which she probably did, but she also confessed to having flown on the back of a demon after smearing herself with an ointment made of the blood of newborn children. We're a little less convinced about that last one. Regardless, in 1428, she was burned alive at the age of 40.
So, this is a drink that we call diabolical spirit because that's one of the things that comes up as a phrase in her story, and I really loved it. And at first, I was like, "Ooh, we need to figure out a way to do a drink inspired by a goat flight," but that's a little too. And then there was part of me that was like radishes and garlic, and I was like, "Oh, slow your roll." I would drink that. I don't know if everyone else would. So I wanted to make a drink that kind of references those allegations that she drank blood. But this is definitely a very delightful drink. It's a beautiful color, it's deep red, but it also has a really surprisingly complex flavor. So, as we say in the book, looks like blood, rich in taste, full of antioxidants. It's essentially a health drink. So let me hold up the ingredients list for
Yes,
Diabolical
yes.
Spirit and see if we can all read it. I think my thing is a little long on that side. Boop, boop, boop.
It looks
And
good.
we'll leave that up for another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And as I do this, I realize one of my ingredients is here in the fridge and I have to pull it out.
Oh.
I got it. I got it. I'm ready. So, so this is one that is has a couple more ingredients than our first one. One of the things we always talk about on the show and that is part of the book is that none of these cocktails are really what I would categorize as hard to make. The worst thing you might have to do is freeze something overnight beforehand. But the whole thing is that like I love a good cocktail and I know lots of other people do and like we really want to encourage people to just play and develop their own style and develop their own approach to making drinks at home so that you're not just left doing a spirit and a mixer, which if that's your jam, go for it. But if you want something that has a little bit more flavor, that's sort of how we approach cocktail making and what we want to do with these. So for this one, we are going to start with our shaker. Um,
I apologize if I just got a little darker. My light bulb just burned out.
it's the diabolical spirit coming
It's
for
because
you.
we're talking about witches, right?
And in this one, we are going to put ice in this shaker, but I'm not going to do it at the top. I will also explain that one. This one starts out with your 3/4 of an ounce of grenadine. I have mine in a cute little flask. Um, Grenadine is one
Really?
of those things that cocktail people have strong opinions about, right? There's like the easily available one you all recognize on a shelf. Um, and that's totally fine. If that's what's available to you and you like it, that's cool. But I will say there are a lot of other ones available that are very craftily made and have a richer flavor and it shifts the flavor of your drink a little bit. So again, that was 3/4 of an ounce of grenadine. Then we're going to do 1/2 ounce of lemon juice. I like a
So I
fresh
prepared.
squeeze.
I
I
do
like a fresh
too, and I didn't
squeeze.
want to. I didn't want to do it right here. So this is my fresh
Yeah,
squeeze.
that's exactly what I did. I pre-squeezed
Yep.
mine. If you use the squeezy bottle, I am not going to judge you. It's the same
Nope.
thing. The fresher it is, the
Lemon.
better it is in terms of like the richness of the flavor and the depth of the flavor. But drink what you drink. Then you're going to
Exactly.
just put in an ounce of gin.
Oh, right to the desk.
Did you make a mess, my love?
Oh no, I'm having one of those days. My bulb just came back on though, so we're all good. But now I'm just having one of those days where I was like, I'm going to spill every single thing that I do because it's one of those days. Everybody has them.
That's fine. I need to send you like a rubber mat for when you're making drinks.
Absolutely. I am the one who should have that. Like,
Um, and then we're gonna do 3/4 of an ounce of amaretto.
so I have this tiny little amaretto bottle, which I don't know where it came from. So I decided I was going to use it up.
That seems great. That
Right.
seems
I
super
also
duper
actually
great.
brought my normal sized bottle in here as well, but didn't realize I was not really going to need that. We have 3/4. Yes.
Yes.
That's actually one of the things that I really like about these cocktails is they are many of them are very much uh, a journey. If you don't have this, you could try substituting something else. It's a little bit of a choose your own
Always.
adventure sometimes. It's not something to be, just mix it and see how it tastes.
We are, we give you recipes, but like I am not precious about them. My thing is never like, this is the only way to make this drink. Because
Mm-hmm.
everybody has different tastes. My taste is not Maria's, is not, other people in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So do what you want. And then the last thing that we're adding to this is 3 ounces of pomegranate juice. I will also tell you while we pour that there's a fun little trick. If you have what's called a cobbler shaker at home, so that is a shaker that you've seen many times that looks like this. Most, but not all, cobbler shakers, this little cap is an ounce. Like that's your measure that you just have handy. And you'll notice a lot of these you can kind of see on this have lines on
Right.
the side, and you can just
I'm
keep an
using,
eye, you eyeball it a little bit, and that's your ounce measure. If you
that's
don't
funny.
want to buy a jigger, you're golden.
I'm using one of those and I have never heard that before. That's excellent. Like,
I will say the shaker that I'm using, which is a Halloweeny one, that rule does not
mm-hmm.
apply. If I poured that way, we would be in trouble. But
Our show would be done right now. Like,
it's time for everybody to go to bed. Good night.
right. Good night. We'll read one more bedtime story.
And then once you got that, we're gonna put ice in our shaker. Oh, that's me kicking a bottle. That's what that was.
Oh, that's like my gin bottle hitting the table. You gotta hope it works out.
And now that we have ice in here, it is time for shaky shakes. I'm going to wait
All
for Maria
right.
so we don't have ongoing
Yep.
shaky shake noise. Ready?
All right. Ready.
If you're wondering how long do you want
Okay.
to shake it, for me, I shake it usually any drink until the sides of the shaker start to get chill. You want it
Me.
cold. That's the whole point, is that your drink should be
Yes.
chilly. And for this one, let me do another ice drop. You're just gonna strain it over fresh ice. If you've ever wondered why do we strain over fresh ice instead of just dumping in, it's because if you keep this ice, your drink is going to dilute really quickly as you're drinking, and it just won't be as yummy. You'll lose some of your flavor as you go. So when you have fresh ice that has not just had like friction applied to it, it'll be a little bit colder and you'll just start out a little bit easier. So, as we said, nice dark color, looks like blood, full of antioxidants. Voila.
Your apothecary would be happy. All right. Cheers.
Cheers.
Awesome.
Pomegranate juice is like, I don't know who figured out that we could eat pomegranates, but I want to travel back through time and give them a big old kiss.
I
Mm.
know, right? But the drinking of it is so much simpler than they trying to get the seeds out of it. It's one of the
um,
things that I really like about this cocktail is that it is very fruity, and then suddenly you get the amaretto note in
mhm.
it, and
That's like where it
it's so
ends. Yeah.
lovely. Yeah,
Yeah, this is one, to me, this is a little too sweet for like a hot weather drink. I don't like
yeah,
that much sugar
I
in the
agree.
heat. It just everything feels heavy. But I love this for like autumn going into winter. It's a really good winter drink. I love it. Okay, you want to make a mocktail?
Let's make a mocktail.
Let's do it. Okay, the mocktail is actually
I
really,
need
really
another sip of
similar.
this though.
The
I wasn't
mocktail
done
is
yet.
very, very similar. And once again, I'm kind of going to cross contaminate just for
I'm
ease.
actually going to use something separate for my
You are,
shaker.
aren't you fancy with your second
I
one?
know, because I
I
have
mean, I'm
to.
trying to be like, now I feel pressured. I'm going to pull out my Boston shaker.
Ooh, oh, whoa, up in it by a level. Like,
Dun, dun, dun. So in your mocktail, we're obviously skipping the gin. And then we're going to sub out that amaretto for an almond syrup. If you have orgeat, that's great. Orgeat is a little bit more of a complex flavor than a straight almond syrup, but it is an almond base, or you can just do a regular almond syrup. That's like literally a coffee house almond syrup is fine. So we
And
start
you'll
this
see
one
that's what I'm
with,
using
it works like a
with
charm.
some grenadine.
This one starts, yes, with 3/4 of an ounce of grenadine, which I am pouring, I realize, off camera. I apologize, but I assure you that was grenadine. And then we will once
Promise.
again do a 1/2 ounce of lemon juice. Boop, boop, boop. I actually went a little too hard with my lemon juice there, which is just fine. I realized that I did not preset my almond syrup, but that's fine. I have it handy. So that's 3/4 of an ounce of almond syrup.
Almond syrup.
Which I love in kind of everything. If you drink a lot of tiki drinks, you've probably had a lot of drinks that have orgeat in it. That's another one that gives a lot of body to drinks. And then once we have that, we will once again do another 3 ounces of pomegranate juice. So that is, this is this end of my jigger, right? Just in case people are not familiar with two-sided jiggers. Like this is the 1 ounce side and this is 2, but not all jiggers are 1 and 2 ounces.
Mine is not. Mine is 1 and mine is a 1/2. So we are very different in our jiggers. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I have many because I just like them. But that is that. So this one will, in case you're doing the math, be 1 ounce less of beverage than your first one. Which is fine. If you want to add more pomegranate juice, you can. If you want to add a little water to make up that gap, you can. Also, if you really just want to sub out the gin, what we usually use on the show is flat tonic water. So I'm going to put my ice in here, and then it's time for shaky shakes.
All right, ice time. Which is good because I'm very melty.
And I am also going to go ahead and pre-ice my receptacle that I drink out of.
Yes. Nice. And a dish of water.
Okay, so let me lid my Boston shaker here.
I love those.
Are you ready to shake, my love?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. Pop. Let me get my other strainer. And in the book, we actually talk you through all of the like basic stuff you might want for your bar, including this Hawthorne strainer that I'm using right here. But also kind of recommends sub outs, like things you can use if you don't want to start buying bar tools, but you still want to make drinks, because you don't need bar tools. I mean, they're handy, but it's really all about whatever works best for you and your life. Easy. And that is the Diabolical Spirit in its mocktail form. Cheers-a-roo.
Cheers.
This is one where I actually really like the mocktail on this because I really like that almond syrup.
They look, I don't know how they look on camera, but in my room here, they look remarkably similar.
Pretty darn close. And this is one where I like a rosemary sprig. And as we mentioned a few moments ago, like not everybody likes to put a garnish on a drink if that component is not part of the drink. But particularly when we're talking about witchcraft and herbals, it seems like the right thing to just finish it off. So that is the Diabolical Spirit. Maria is ready with her sprig.
I'm ready with that sprig because it's herbal.
So those are our drinks for today, which means that now we are ready to flip over and do questions, which I believe we are going to be rejoined by our fabulous hostess for it.
Yes, hello.
Welcome back.
That was so entertaining. I wish my camera was on so that you could see what a disaster was over here, because I was trying to follow along And you guys are so good at this, and I need more work for sure. But
It
I did
just
manage
matters what it tastes like.
something.
Right? Here's the, I mean, we say it all the time on the show. We put it in the book. There's no such thing as cocktail jail. Nobody
Right.
cares if you mess up. You're at home. This is your hobby.
Right. Just show
So
it
I
a really
managed to,
lovely glass and it's good.
okay, so we do have a few questions, and I populated a
Yeah.
lot that we got over on Novel Suspect social media. The first one, I believe, is for pertaining the strawberry vodka.
Yeah.
The drink you made. It says, I'm making strawberry vodka. Am I mashing up strawberries or just cutting them?
You can
Oh,
do either. Basically, it's kind of like think about surface area, right? So if you mash them a little
mhm.
bit, you're going to create more surface area, which means like more parts of the strawberry are getting touched at all times by your vodka, which means you're probably going to get a little bit stronger infusion. But if you are shaking it periodically anyway, it's going to start to break down in the vodka. So you don't necessarily need to do that step unless you just got to work through some stuff.
Sometimes you do.
Here's to that. Okay, so we're going to take a step back here. For those who don't know about your podcast, can you talk a little bit about your podcast and what the inspiration behind it is, what you talk about on there, and some of your fun stories?
Yeah. Um, so this one started because one of my bosses, I have worked at iHeart for a long time, and Stuff Media before that, before it was part of iHeart in the podcast division. And one of my bosses had come to me with the story of Julia Tofana and said, could you make a podcast out of this? And if you listen to the show, which you may not if you're asking this question, but the Julia Tofana story is about a woman poisoner. And it's a cool story, but there is not enough ready information and reliable sourcing to actually make like a series out of
Right.
it. And
Right. She was in
so,
ancient Rome, and that's a very long time ago. It's hard
yeah,
to,
there's something like
it's
one
hard.
extant document that is
Yeah.
in Italian in Rome, not digitized. So we would have had to
Right.
become fluent enough to read the style of Italian from several hundred years ago and travel to Italy
Oh,
and get permission to touch it. Like it just wasn't going to happen. And even then, if we had
right.
it, it still wouldn't be enough for a series. So I got to thinking, and at first I was like, what if we did a series that was just women poisoners? And then I had reached out to Maria because we used to work together at How Stuff Works. She was a writer for me when I was a copy editor. And I was like, I know that this is a person I would trust to like do the writing for this show. And then Maria and I met in San Francisco and we had a weekend where we just kind
Mhm.
of like knocked out what the show was going to be. And we realized we could do a season of Women Poisoners and then we could do a season
Mhm.
of another crime and
Other
another crime,
other
another crime.
things. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Um,
that's really how it started.
yeah.
And Maria has kind of become the person who really manages like the direction it goes in. So she really like it's her determination. Like, I mean, we both have input, obviously, but she's the
Right.
one who will be like, next season, I think what I would like to do, and then we have that discussion.
Right. And then I list out a bunch of people. So if you didn't like Imposter Season, for example, I'm sorry. You could blame me. I'm like,
How do you
I,
determine what is the best direction to go?
you know, when I think about our calendar of seasons to come, I think about a few, very few, but important things, I think. We are currently in a season where we're talking about partners in crime, for instance. And it's actually a very violent season. There's a lot of bank heists with gunfire, and there are suicides, and there's just a lot going on in this that is that makes the stories difficult to tell because you get emotional about them. Not that you identify with the criminal, but just you're like, wow, she died in a hail of gunfire. Like, what was that even like? Sometimes you have to, I feel, kind of go back and forth with like an imposter season, for instance, where no one was killed, I think, we talked about a man's shoes in one episode, and it was really, it's really, and yet they were still all committing crimes. It's just the level of crime that was different. And sometimes you need to take a break from that serious historical true crime. There were no laws around these things. Things were a little bit just crazy and out there. And I also think sometimes it's just, hey, that sounds like a fun season to do, to be honest. Like it's sometimes you hear or a story about a particular criminal, and hey, maybe there might be 10 more criminals who did a similar thing, and I'll look into it and we'll talk about it. And so there's really no particular I guess I should say there's really no particular rhyme or reason as to how it works, but there's kind of a way of how it works, if that makes any sense. I also try, I think, to think of seasons that aren't just things like bank robberies or stalkers. We did a season that was of art heists, and Holly and I both, it was our favorite season, hands down. Favorite for cocktails, favorite for episodes. And it was not originally on any of my radar. And I just happened to be looking at the calendar one day, and I just kind of, it kind of sounds silly, but it did just pop into my head. Like, why haven't we done anything about this? And we did, and we got a tipsy pigeon drink out of it, which is fantastic, and a great set of episodes. And we learned that Salvador Dali had a piece of art at Alcatraz.
No, that was Rikers Island. Rikers Island.
I'm sorry, Rikers Island. That's right. Oh my gosh, I got it wrong. But just stories
You're going to like history jail.
See, there is a history jail. There might not be a cocktail jail, but stories like that where we're like, we didn't even know that happened. So sometimes there's just stories that come up that you really want to tell. You're like, if I didn't know and Holly didn't know, this must not really be out there. And those are the ones that are kind of fun to tell sometimes.
Yeah.
No hail or gunfire at Dali.
Follow-up questions that I don't know which one to choose next. So I think in the same as how you got started, you're both so eloquent and engaging podcast hosts. What drew you to podcasting?
I think we both have a similarly like I didn't make that decision kind of
yes. When Holly first talked to me about Criminalia, I was actually deplaning, and my phone was giving me all of my emails and text messages, and I'm like, Holly, what does she have to say about podcasts? Like, why would I, what is this? And I very much at first was like, I would love to write this. This sounds like a great time. I want to tell these stories. This is wonderful. I don't want to host. And then 2 weeks later, I still don't want to host. 2 weeks later,
but I wore her down.
Like, right. I'm like, why not try it? I'd never done anything like it before. And I'd of course written a lot of things before, but I had never written for a podcast, and then I never hosted a podcast. And if I was going to host a podcast, it would be with Holly, because we get along so well, and the banter's so much fun when we do it, even when we're talking about terrible things. By the end of that story, we both look at each other and go, wow. So
that happened.
We agree on a lot of that. Yeah. That was a thing that happened. Yes. So my podcasting, I say, was purely accidental.
Mine was too, and I almost feel bad because I have been doing this long enough that like I will go to events and people will be like, what should I do if I want to like be a podcaster and do the stuff you do? And I'm like, my path is not one you can easily replicate. Because as I mentioned earlier, I used to be an editor at How Stuff Works, like a copy editor. And there was a party after work one day when I and my now co-host on Stuff You Missed in History class, Tracy Wilson, we were just chatting and we were kind of being catty. And our boss overheard us and we got called into his office the next morning, and I honestly thought I was getting fired. But he said, for, talking trash about people in our office. And instead he was like, I actually think you guys have really interesting conversational chemistry. Do you want to try doing a podcast together? And we started with a podcast that is not Stuff You Missed in History Class. That was a pop culture podcast that we did for a while. And it had a very dedicated following, but it was kind of on the smallish side. And then Stuff You Missed in History Class, one of the hosts went on maternity leave and I subbed for her. And then not long after she came back, she realized she wanted to move on to another opportunity. And at the same time, the other person that had co-hosted with her was like, I am also ready for a break because working on a history podcast is a lot of work. Like it's a lot of research, it's a lot of writing, it's a lot of fact checking, it's a lot of like trying to prep and learn pronunciations. And like at that point in time, none of us, with a couple of exceptions at our company, were doing exclusively podcasts. We were podcasting as a side thing to the copy and site work that we were doing. So like I was carrying full editorial load and trying to produce this podcast all the time. So that got to be a little wild, but eventually we took over history class, and eventually that became the primary focus of my work. And that's how I got into podcasting. It's like I said, it's kind of hard to replicate.
Very scary.
Be snarky at a party, and that will kick off everything.
Your stories of snark.
I'm in the wrong field. Okay, so two similar questions. I guess I'll start with, walk us through making a drink. Where does it start, and when do you know when you have the recipe perfect, ready to go out into the world?
Okay. This is actually a longer answer than you might think, but also a shorter answer. So when we first started this little endeavor, listen, Holly drinks. I have been a drinker for a very long time. And so I have had a lot of drinks. I have made myself a lot of drinks. But like when I pitched this idea of like, what if we added a cocktail segment? I realized pretty quickly that like I didn't have a bag of tricks. It wasn't like my bag of tricks was shallow. I just didn't have one. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do bartending school really quick. So I did. So that was a big part of it in terms of just learning the fundamentals of like how to balance a cocktail. You learn how to make all of the like standard drinks, but you also, if you get good instruction, you understand like what makes a cocktail work and why it needs to be balanced a certain way. And then taking that knowledge, now when I read something, like when Maria sends over the first draft of like one of our episodes, I read through it, and I usually, as I'm reading through it, I keep a notepad next to me, and I literally just write down the stuff that really resonates with me for whatever silly reason. Like it can literally be the make of a car, the color of somebody's clothes. It can be, in the case of Mateucha, it's the phrase diabolical spirit just hit me and I thought it was really funny. And of course the goat, but we can't. No, but I think there are very few people that want to have a cocktail that tastes like a goat. So, but I start jotting those things down. And sometimes it's immediate. Sometimes my brain goes, you know what this needs? It needs creme de menthe, and it needs this. It needs to be this color. It needs to be this. And I just come down here into my little bar, and I usually have a preliminary recipe that I have come up with in my head where I'm like, okay, we need to do 2 parts spirit, 1 part like I'll use like the sour formula, which is the easiest thing on earth. If you learn this, you can start making so many cocktails and your friends will think you're super badass. 2 parts spirit, 1 part sweet, like a simple syrup or a flavored syrup, 1 part citrus, like your lemon juice, your lime juice, etc. And you can start a cocktail based on that and get some pretty good combos. And of course, the combinations are limitless. And so I'll come down, but there are other, obviously, like formulas for cocktails. That's just a really easy one. It's a great base one. It's like what, Collins's are based off of whiskey sours. Old school daiquiris are based off of that recipe, not the frozen one, but the actual like cocktail. And I'll come down with a recipe written and I will make that. And sometimes, like, hot damn, it's great right out of the gate. And sometimes I take a sip and go, what on earth was I thinking? And then I
didn't make it.
And then I just kind of like taste it really like thoughtfully and I say, okay, what is this missing? Is it too sweet? Is it too Bright. Does it have too much of
Mhm.
like a lemon note? Does it have too much of anything? Does it have not enough of something? Does it just kind of feel a little anemic, like it needs something? There's a phrase that I use that is not in any way official or smart. But there's Maria's like, please don't tell the story. But there's this phrase. There's always that one ingredient where I'm like, this is the thing that puts a big ass on this drink. Like this is the thing that gives it like a full body, a really good flavor, like it all comes together. And when it does, you just know it. Like you can taste the difference. Sometimes it's literally as simple as, oh, I added, bitters. Oh, I added a drop
Mhm.
of liquid smoke. Oh, I added
Excuse
whatever.
me.
And you'll taste it and be like, good, we're golden. Um, that's the very long version of that answer. So it's some mixy guesswork, but I always usually have a structure to start with.
On
Very,
average,
I
how
always, oh, sorry. I was going to say, I
okay.
always bring this up when we talk about cocktails, but I always bring up our art heist season, cocktail season, because she also sort of assigned herself this project of making the cocktails look like the paintings and objects that were stolen. And I did not realize this when we first started the season, and I felt like such a jerk because I was like, oh my gosh, you totally made, that's why you used the marshmallow flute, or like, I get it now, but I did not see it when it was happening. And
It's
I
okay.
love
A
that
fun
kind
reveal.
of, absolutely. But I love that kind of season where the cocktails are not just inspired by the story, but are also fun in some other
Yeah.
sense. Like I look like a Picasso, or Jakob de Guy in the Third has nothing on this drink. Like
Ooh, I'm having some weird blinkage at my house. Jakob de Gein the Third is
it's
like, stop talking about me.
it's he's like the ghost, right? It's the bulbs. It's like I don't know what it is today.
Da-da-da-da.
So that's actually perfect for our next question. What are both of your number one all-time favorite drinks from all the seasons in Criminalia? If you can't choose, you can choose multiple. But if you had to like desert island cocktail,
I'm pulling the book out. I have
I
a
was just going to do
couple.
that too. I'm like, I have to look at this book. I'm like,
I have
because
a
there's one that
couple.
I always talk about.
Um, yeah, I have a couple. One of them is from our first season. Um, I'm not going to talk about the one you're going to talk about, Maria, in
Because
case
I
you
always
already know
talk about the
one.
same one you already know. I know.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
one of them is from our first season, which was Lady Poisoners, and it's called The White
Yes.
Toad. And
Oh,
that
this is a
story is
great
about
drink.
Sally Bassett, who was an enslaved woman who she is accused of trying to kill someone with poison for them having mistreated her granddaughter. And this was in Bermuda. And so this was one of those episodes where it all tied into like the slave trade and all
Mhm.
of the like kind of dark triangle trade of like slavery, sugar, rum that went along with that. And so we wanted to not touch any of those components for it. And so it's a really, really simple drink. It's ginger liqueur and vanilla vodka and ginger beer. And then you do a fresh ginger garnish on it. And it's just like, it's such a simple drink, but it's so drinkable. And like, I
It
make it all
is.
the time at home. I make it for friends all the time. It's always like a really popular one. And it's just become like a really ready go to because it doesn't take a lot of time. It doesn't take a lot of complicated steps, but it's like muy deliciosa.
Did you have another one
I will, but
that
you
you
go
wanted to talk
next.
about? Oh, okay. So I actually very much for a long time, my answer to that also would have been white toad. And white toad was an ingredient in her poisonous powder, which is where the title for the drink came from. But I also um, have a drink from the very first season, and it is from a woman. It's inspired by a woman named Locusta, and she was a poison maker, not a poisoner herself. She made poisons, and she primarily made poisons for the imperial court and Nero, who loved to poison everyone. And she was plant based, and it kind of, she probably could have been a really kick ass apothecary, but she went down the road of, no, I'm going to make poisons instead. So She might have been interesting to have a cup of coffee with. But her drink is the botanist's latte. And it is a latte. It's based in milk. I believe that milk of your choice, but we Holly made it with almond, and I agree. I think it's lovely with almond milk. It has culinary rosebuds and brandy and Earl Grey tea in it. And it's just, I live where there is rainy season for 6 months, like just straight on 6 months. And the botanist latte is a big, big hit for me. And it has been. We are in, season 14, and this is from season 1. So this has been sticking with me for quite a while. And it's warm and it's delicious. And did I mention it has rosebuds in it? And you're like, I mean, come on, right? I felt like this drink really did the story and the episode. I think it really did. I think Lakeista would have been proud of that cocktail. I do.
My other next one is one from that episode we did about Salvador Dali and the piece of art he made for Rikers Island, which was there for a long time. Now it is lost. But as Maria said, I was trying to make the drinks look like the art.
Which was so awesome.
And for that one, I made a drink called Dali's Antics. And part of that was because we talked in the episode about, obviously you can't leave out what a big personality Salvador Dali was. And this great detail that when he walked into a room, he would go, "Dali is here," which I love.
I know, right? Can you imagine? But like being,
and so for that drink, it is kind of like a cream-based martini almost. It's got vodka, it's got liqueur 43, which is a Spanish vanilla liqueur, which I picked because it related to Dali's Spanish background. There's heavy cream in it, and then there's some Angostura bitters, and on top you drop the bitters and then you sprinkle a little bit of black salt. And that's because that particular drawing was like a pen and ink piece that he did for the prison, because he was supposed to give a lecture there to their art program and he was sick that day. So he did a quick piece of art and sent it as like an apology. And it got hung over the trash cans in their mess hall.
The cafeteria.
So like people were just like throwing their leftovers from their trays, and it got spattered with gloop. Like it was already had the spatter of ink on it, but then it got like discolored red splotches and stuff. So the idea is that the drink is kind of a whitish tone, like a piece of paper would be, a piece of art paper. But then because of the way you drop the Angostura bitters on top and the black sea salt on top of that, it gets these weird little speckles that show up as like red and black, and it looks a little like a defaced piece of art. So that's one of my other big favorites. And it's also delicious.
I'm not a sweet drink person at all, actually. But if I was, I would, or if you are, I would recommend also from Art House season, the BFF, which is just, the story is fun. The drink is fun. It's a story of Jakob de Gaulle and his friend who got matching portraits done. Like imagine yourself at a photo booth, like with your best friend, like, except, at that time you had to have it painted, right? So
they have their matching is Rembrandt.
Is Rembrandt, exactly. And like, they had their big colors and they matched and they faced each other in their portraits. And the only real difference between the portraits is that one has been named the takeaway Rembrandt because it's been stolen so many times, and the other is not. But the Jakob de Gaulle drink, the BFF, it's like a dessert. To me, it's a dessert beverage. It's spiced rum. Let me look down here, Chambord. It has brown sugar, a sprinkle of coconut sugar, hot black tea, whipping cream on top. It's a dessert beverage, which is not necessarily up my alley, but I could see it being fantastic after like a nice holiday, with friends. A little sprinkle of cinnamon on the top, maybe. I recommend the drink, even though I am not a sweet person, so that means even more.
Okay, so I like this question a lot. What's one of the most interesting or strangest facts that you've come across when researching for Criminalia? I feel like
There
a
are
lot,
so
probably.
there are a
So
lot.
many.
I actually feel so overwhelmed by this question.
Oh,
I know, right?
I feel, and here's why, because every single crime that I research, there's always something. There's always, every single one of them where like you might not find it on your first day of research, but like by day two, you're like, wait, what? You know, like somebody said what? Or they how did they get there's always some crazy thing where you didn't happen to notice it at first and then you do and you can't not see it anymore and it has to become part of the
Yeah.
story. But off the top of my head, I actually can't think of one because I feel like they happen in every episode. And whenever we're recording, I always stop. Like Holly will be reading, and she'll stop, and I'll be ready to go, and I'll be like, "Hey, so while I was researching, I found that X, Y, and Z happened to this guy, but I didn't put it in because." It doesn't really fit here, but it was weird. It was
Yeah.
yeah. There's always something. Everybody's got something.
Here was my big one. I actually have two, and they're both from the art heist season. One is that it took a shockingly long time for art museums to get their act together with security. Like,
So there
there
was
were
one museum
instances
in
where
particular,
we would
yeah,
talk about museums where it was like a theft happened and
yeah,
they had security cameras but like they didn't routinely turn them on, or
right,
and then after the theft they wouldn't like put a procedure in place to keep them on all the
right.
time.
Or
And I
like
was
nothing
always
had
just like,
glass over it.
what is
Like
going on?
I know people were just
Just
coming in
turn
during
it
the
on.
day and like taking art off the wall, putting it in like a plastic bag and walking out. And that was really the Dulwich Gallery.
wild.
They had three or four like over the span of maybe 20 years. And I remember we had this conversation where we were like, could you maybe think about security? Like
You
just
just
maybe. Your
turn on
art
a
is
camera and you
wonderful,
have fun.
right? Maybe hire a
um
security guard. Like
the other one related to that, and I knew it, but it really struck me because of something that Maria found while she was researching. The Mona Lisa was not a famous work of art until
right.
the like 1911 when it was stolen. Like, it was a
Mm-hmm.
lesser known Da Vinci, which I knew, but like it was so much lesser known that Maria had found like a news article or something where the piece of art that they showed in
Who
reporting
was
it
it,
was
right?
not even the Mona Lisa. It was
Yeah,
some other picture of a woman.
that's
And it was like,
yes,
it's so mind boggling because today, I mean, like, if you go to the Louvre, you can buy the Mona Lisa on socks, on a hand fan, on like
right.
a
Yep.
power drive for your phone backup, on like everything you can possibly imagine.
Right.
And yet,
Yeah,
115
yeah.
years ago, people were like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right. I actually forgot about that, but now that you mention it, I always include any sort of like photo of the person or photo of an event that happened with them, or this is the bank that they robbed, this is his mugshot, just so that we get a sense and grounding of this is the story, this is these are the people, this is what they looked like in 1912. And I totally forgot about that story about the Mona Lisa and the newspaper.
It's so wild. Just
I
the
feel like
the
that happens a
idea that
lot with art.
yeah,
Right? They're like,
wrong
it's
art.
close enough. Like it's a woman. Just just
It's a
print
lady,
it.
right? Some chick. I don't know. I think it's a Da Vinci. Just run it.
Right? Is she smiling? No? Yes? Okay.
Right? Like, nobody cared who Mona Lisa was and if she was smiling at
Nobody
that point.
cared.
They were just trying to figure
Absolutely
it
did
out.
not care.
Okay, so let's see. Here's our next question. What started your love of barcraft and how did you develop your skills? I think you kind of brushed over this a little bit, but anything
Yeah,
to
I
add?
did. I mean, I don't. I'm a busy bee in general. Like, I'm not. I definitely have that trait where if I do something and I get interested in it, I want to know all about it. As I said, I'm a lifelong drinker. I mean, I've been drinking for a long time, and it's like when I was young, like everybody else when you're young, you kind of don't care, and the focus is really like, I'd like to get ripped tonight. Now, I mean, I love to drink, but I don't actually like to be drunk. So I want to
Mm-hmm.
make drinks that I enjoy for what they are, not for what they can do to my brain. It's sure still fun to be buzzy, but like it's a lot more interesting to me to find flavors that you might not think belong together and figure out a way to marry them, like find whatever the bridge ingredient is that makes them do something interesting. Sometimes it
Mhm.
works. Sometimes people look at me like I'm crazy. We did a drink in the first season that is not in the book, which was a savory cocktail. And it was based on,
Mhm.
I think, was it a Roman story of a man who had been murdered by a poison mushroom? And so I was like, I
Oh
want to
yes,
do a roasted mushroom and garlic cocktail. And I
I
did,
remember this.
which I really liked. It's not for everybody,
I thought it was
obviously, but
wonderful. Um,
the good
but
thing
I
was
think people
the
don't
infused
necessarily think of
vodka.
mushrooms in cocktails.
Yeah, the infused vodka we got from it is also like one of those things that was great in Bloody Marys and stuff. So it just became more interesting to me to see what I could do to elevate flavors and do things that aren't just the same old, same old. I mean, I still will drink like a very basic drink a lot of the time, right? If I'm traveling, give me a vodka Diet Coke, I'm fine. But if I'm making a drink, I just want to do something more interesting than that usually.
Yeah. I loved this. Like when savory comes up, that's where I just love it. I don't have a sweet tooth at all. I have the salt tooth. And one of the things that Holly introduced me to, which I just had never occurred to me in cocktails, was black pepper.
Yeah.
And when that happened, I was like, whoa, how did I mean, I just had one of those moments of I've never thought outside of like the world of Bloody Marys, that that black pepper belonged in any of my cocktails, and it does. As it turns out, it absolutely does.
Yeah.
As just mushrooms and garlic and savory things, and it doesn't have to be just a tomato based with vodka savory drink. We can move ahead.
Dun dun dun.
So for our next question, we have what resources do you find yourselves turning to create the stories we get to enjoy?
That's an interesting question. Um, I tend to think of seasons in two ways, actually. I sometimes will know a story and want to do a season because I know that particular story and it needs to be told, and I'll try to find, enough for 18 to 20 episode season for us to do. But on the other hand, sometimes I absolutely have no idea what I want to do. I just know I don't want it to include a lot of trigger warnings about suicides, and I'm tired of this, and I don't want to talk about that. And I will just start poking around, and not necessarily in like really well known media places, but Library of Congress, looking at mugshots, looking at court records, seeing what happened in this particular decade. If I can look in the National Archives or look in so it's not things like going to the History Channel or just normal sort of local newspapers in various parts of the country. It sometimes is, but oftentimes these days it's, wow, look at that guy's mugshot. What the hell did he do? Like you see something and you're like, did he get like completely beat up before they took that picture, and who beat him up? And then I need to know, and then I start going down the hole. And so it's generally kind of a small detail will sometimes turn into an entire season, and it'll be something crazy like that 31-year-old married a 15-year-old so they could bank rob together. What is, and I'm like, what is that? So, and then again, I got 10 tabs open trying to find out what went on in there. But it's really, I take inspiration from all over the place, and traveling too. I mean, art season was great because we got to talk about all sorts of, art and cities and artists and all of this, but not all seasons are like that. Some seasons are much more difficult. Like we did Stalker season, and Stalker season, we try to, well, let me back up a second. We try not to talk about anyone who is, well, we don't talk about anyone who is alive. You have to be, generally up to about the Great Depression or so. We don't really do anything that your family, your son might take issue with this. I don't want to offend anyone. I'm just trying to tell a story, and sometimes I have to cross people off the list, even though their stories are very interesting, because I don't want to offend a family, and I don't want to tell a story that someone might be upset about because a wife is still alive, for instance, or children or things like that. So headlines, Library of Congress, and everything in between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, just to add as an addendum to Maria's thing about why we don't do people who are alive, obviously part of it is thinking of the family, but also, there's
Yes.
this thing that happens sometimes with true crime podcasts where listeners become inspired to try to solve something themselves, and
Yeah.
there are a lot of instances of people kind of crossing boundaries and getting involved in people's lives in ways they should not be and bothering people that
Yes.
they should not. Like, nobody wants to open their door and have someone say, I heard about your nephew on a podcast and I think I have a solution and I have questions. Like, je
Exactly. Nobody
m'excuse, I'm
wants
just
that
trying to
at
go to
all.
work.
Right.
So part of
So we
doing historical true crime is we sidestep all of those problems.
Yeah. And we're not looking to glamorize anybody. We're just kind of looking to tell the story. And sometimes when we're telling that story, we'll be like, did that really just happen? Like, did he really just say that? Did that really, there was no law for that. Oh my God, and we'll end up spinning this yarn of, man, it's a good thing this does, like may or may not be able to happen today. We did a bunch of snake oil stories, for instance, where before any legislation was enacted, people were buying, sometimes things that would kill them because they thought it would make them better, and that is something of that time and place. And a lot of times we find there's no law for it, and so once we start writing about it and talking about it, you start to think, wow, like how many other people were in this situation just
Yeah.
like this? And then that's another rabbit hole that you go
I have an interesting question here.
Well,
Okay, so I heard you are both pet lovers. If your pets
oh,
were to host a true crime history cocktail mocktail party, what would the signature drink what signature drink would they make and serve? That's the first part.
okay.
What would be
okay.
the crime inspired name for it?
Okay, so I have a cat named Sweet Lime. So her drink would be Sweet Lime. And because she is it's all about Sweet Lime. So of course it would be her drink. She would not give that away to anything else. And I believe that she probably wouldn't want to talk about anything other than the fact that, why doesn't Tom ever catch Jerry?
Itchy and scratchy, unearthed.
Right. And maybe afterwards of like, why is mom so stingy with the treats? But I really do believe that it would have to be, why couldn't Tom ever catch Jerry?
See, I'm thinking because I currently have two cats, one of whom is very elderly and silly. And his cocktail would have to be like, a little tuna muddled with some broth,
Oh
and maybe
yeah.
like a little, a little some yummy floral flavored water on top of it. We used to have a cat named Mr. Burns who really loved coffee, so he'd have like an Irish coffee, I'm pretty sure. I
Right.
did not give that
I
cat
think he'd
coffee, but
spike
he
it.
did always try to steal coffee.
He'd want it, yeah.
And I think, obviously the show would be called Criminalia. That's just, they're ready.
Right.
They're ready to
There you go.
discuss the deep crimes of
Yes.
only being held 23 out of 24 hours a day. Criminal.
Which is, that is a crime. What's going on in your house? Come on. I do have a second cat, but he does not like to be around. Sweet Lime actually.
Yeah, our other cat would be like, I'm sorry, I'm not talking to anyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Oliver's like, give me the cheese. I don't need to talk to anyone. It's but Sweet Lime, it's funny because I have actually joked that she is at heart a podcaster because she loves my microphone setup, and she rubs herself all over it, and she'll grab it by her hands and you can also hear her sometimes down the hall singing the song of her people while we're trying to record. So she's very interested in podcasting.
She's ready.
She's ready to go. She's like, why don't you let me? So I'm a mean mom.
My two cats are like mean mugging me from the side because they want food. So here we're talking about them and like what's happening. Okay, so I have two more questions.
Right.
So the first one is, are there any stories that you are interested in covering? I guess this would be like thematically topics that you're interested in covering that you haven't yet.
So I have a calendar, and it's a running calendar of a recording schedule, right? But I have another tab in that spreadsheet where I call it possibles, and I have a lot in the possibles category that I'm actually not going to talk about.
I will say because I would like to do another season to be a surprise.
I think we could. I mean,
Archives we could do another season of Archives in the future. I think because that was just, it was a very joyous season. Because even though like it's, in some cases, art is going missing and being lost forever, which is very heartbreaking. It just, it wasn't violent. Often it was funny. Sometimes it was just so absurd. As we said, like that people would just take a thing off the wall and kind of be just like, goodbye.
Walk out.
Then,
like there was one man who did that and then got apprehended in the taxi cab as he was leaving the museum. Like these are kinds of things where you're like, this is just silly, Yeah. I think that when we were talking about imposters, there was a lot of that as well, where like one guy had like a closet full of costumes and he used to just like, he's like, I crowned the queen. Yeah, like he wasn't killing anyone. He was just having a good time. And
just wanted to be goofy.
Just wanted to have fun. But I do kind of like to keep our seasons kind of a little bit
under wraps. Yeah.
Under wraps until they come out.
Understandable. Okay, so for this, it's kind of, the next question kind of lends itself to this one. It's what's next for Criminalia. I guess this would be maybe not topics, but like, where's the next book? I mean, I know this one isn't out yet, but I would like
it's close.
Literally like, get this book out the door. we gotta do
I know.
I will say I would not ever speak for both of us, but I think Maria shares this sentiment. Like, this book has been a long time in the making. We were talking today, we had a recording session that like, I started taking pictures to put together a pitch document for this book 2.5 years ago. So it's been like a while. It's been a long time to birth this one. And I mean, I think we're both just hoping that people like it before we get too attached to any ideas of doing another one. But we certainly have enough material because this book is based on our first 8 seasons. We don't do seasons the same way other people do. It's not like this year is season blah, blah, blah. We just bump from season to season to season without any gap in between. So we're actually now on season 14. So we have material to do another one. And I don't think we've mentioned it on this stream, but like half of the book is stuff from the podcast and the other half are entirely new stories and new cocktails that people haven't heard before. So we have, a pretty solid base if we wanted to do another one. And then it would just be a matter of like the real work of coming up with the other 50% and then hewing those down and figuring out which ones we would want to go to print, etc. So in the meantime, we're just trying to birth this baby.
I know. Choosing the 50% that weren't episodes was actually kind of fun because there are episodes that we don't do sometimes that are actually on our list of potential episodes for a season. And so when we were choosing new stories for the book, like I went through all of these note files that I had where I was like, my God, I have all of these ideas and I didn't even remember. And so sometimes or sometimes you don't, and you find new things where you're like, how did I not even see this story when we first did this season? This is brand new to me, and that's kind of cool too. So I think coming up very quickly in Criminalia, our season 14 will end at the end of this year. New Year's Eve will end, and we will start a new one that for 2025.
The following week. Yeah,
that's right. To be determined. I might know it, but to be determined.
Fantastic meeting with you today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to pop your title, Killer Cocktails, into the chat one more time for people people who haven't
Awesome.
seen it yet.
Look how pretty.
It is for pre-order. Looking so beautiful. I think everyone needs it on their bar cart. For
There's
pre-order,
lovely.
it comes out 15. If you want to show it off, go for it. I think this is honestly perfect for everyone's. I like an aesthetic bar cart though. I like having like my book so people can like see it. So it's absolutely gorgeous. Their pictures, their new recipes. So I definitely recommend you check it.
There's great art in it, courtesy of Holly. And I mean, and some of the art is just, I mean, it's equally part of the story, but also very funny, like the Dali in prison. So I hope you could see that. I didn't see the book, but there's good stuff in here. It's good stories. They are, if you are a listener of the podcast, the stories are much shorter than what you're used to, but the cocktails are just as good.
That's all that matters. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, and thank you everyone who joined us.
Yes, thank you everybody.
Good night. Happy filming. I got a while to go. We'll get there.